My name is Brenda, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a doctor at the hospital founded by my parents, a legacy I've always cherished. Growing up in a supportive family environment, I've always been proud of my profession. My younger brother is also a doctor, and we share a close working relationship at the hospital. A few years ago, I met my husband, Frank, during his stay in our hospital following an injury. Although he's 3 years my junior, his maturity, reliability, and charm quickly drew me in. Our connection was immediate, and after dating for about a year, we decided to tie the knot. Frank is the vice president at his father's company, and his parents were overjoyed when we got engaged. His mother often expressed how fortunate they felt to welcome a doctor into their family, proudly boasting about both Frank and me. In the early days of our relationship, everything felt perfect. During festive occasions like Christmas, Frank and I would visit his parents, who welcomed us with open arms. I'd bring treats and drinks for their New Year celebrations, while my mother-in-law, Anna, took charge of the cooking. I always offered to help, but she would gently refuse, saying, "Brenda, you work so hard as a doctor. You deserve a break. You're family now. Just relax." Her warmth and kindness always touched me deeply, making me feel truly included. Frank echoed his mother's sentiments, encouraging me to unwind. Those moments filled me with joy, as I felt I had found a second family in them. Recently, something shifted in our dynamic. Frank and I went to visit his parents as we often do, but this time, when we arrived, Anna greeted us with a smile and invited Frank inside. As I picked up my bags, ready to follow him in, she suddenly blocked my path. Her expression turned icy as she glared at me, declaring, "You're not needed here," before slamming the door in my face. I stood frozen in shock, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Hoping for a misunderstanding, I gently tried to open the door again, only to be met with a fiercer glare. "I heard about it. Your parents are in debt, aren't they? We don't need a wife like that," she spat, her tone harsh, before shutting the door once more. Stunned, I stood there with my bags in hand, the laughter and chatter of Frank and Anna drifting through the closed door, as if nothing had transpired. It felt like a punch to the gut. I had no idea what she was talking about. My parents had never mentioned any financial struggles, and there was nothing affecting me or my marriage. Just recently, my father had confided in me about his health, but debt? That was news to me. As I lingered outside, hearing the joyful sounds from within, a realization washed over me. I didn't deserve this kind of treatment. For so long, I had believed Anna liked and valued me for who I was, but now everything felt shattered. I knew I shouldn't tolerate such disrespect, even if it came from my mother-in-law. With that thought firmly in mind, I turned on my heels and headed back to my car. I drove home, feeling a swirl of hurt and confusion, but also a sense of resolve. I deserved to be treated with respect. A week ago, I had a conversation with my husband that lingered in my mind. Both of us have demanding jobs, and we rarely make it home at the same time. However, on this particular day, our schedules aligned. As we settled down together, I shared some significant news. My dad is retiring from being a doctor. His eyesight isn't what it used to be, especially for surgeries, so they've decided to close the hospital. Frank's expression turned to one of shock. "What? The hospital is closing? Do they have debts or something?" I hesitated, unsure about any debts. "I don't think so," I replied, "but they're planning to sell the hospital property, so I won't be working there anymore. I'll be taking a break." Before I could elaborate, an emergency call from the hospital interrupted me. Duty called, and I had to leave immediately. "We'll talk more later," I said as I rushed out the door. After that, we didn't have much time to discuss things further. Frank was busy with work, often coming home late, and I had night shifts, which meant our schedules rarely overlapped. In the following days, our communication dwindled. It dawned on me that Frank might have misunderstood our earlier conversation, thinking my parents' hospital was closing due to debts and that I somehow had a hand in resolving them. Perhaps that's what he had conveyed to his parents, explaining the cold treatment I received from my mother-in-law. It was hard to believe that Anna could treat me like that, but everything felt so tangled. As I drove home, mulling over these thoughts, I suddenly heard a phone ringing in the back seat, realizing that in the chaos of being locked out by my mother-in-law, I had driven off with some of Frank's belongings. I discovered it was his phone that was ringing incessantly. I had never looked at his phone before, but with the persistent ringing, I figured it might be something urgent. I decided to check it. I pulled over to the side of the road and retrieved his phone. I tried a few passwords, guessing it wouldn't be anything too complicated since Frank isn't one to make things difficult. Sure enough, it unlocked with his birthday. As the phone opened, I noticed a caller named Maria, a name I had never heard him mention before. Curiosity piqued. I scrolled through his message history. What I discovered left me utterly speechless. The messages between Frank and Maria flooded my screen, and the content was gut-wrenching. One message read, "I want to see you soon. I wish I could be with you forever." Another said, "I'll be with my wife during the New Year holidays, but I'll miss you." There was even one where he wrote, "Once I get the money, I plan to leave her." Maria replied, "That makes me happy. I love you the most." With every word I read, the horrifying reality settled in. My husband had been cheating on me. My mind went blank. For so long, I had trusted that Frank, along with my father-in-law and mother-in-law, were good people who genuinely cared for me. Now, I realized I had been living a lie. The man I believed to be loyal and kind had been deceiving me all along. The in-laws who once embraced me so warmly had turned their backs. Standing alone in my car, I couldn't shake the shock of this revelation. Everything felt like it was crumbling around me. One evening, I ventured into Frank's study, driven by an intense need to uncover the truth. As I opened one of the drawers, my heart raced at the thought of finding more evidence of his betrayal. To my horror, I discovered photos of him with a woman I didn't recognize. They appeared to be from a trip they had taken together. Alongside the photos lay hotel receipts, further confirming my worst fears. The more I searched, the more shocking details emerged. My heart sank as the reality hit me. There was no denying it any longer. Frank had been unfaithful. Overwhelmed by the weight of it all, I decided to seek solace with my parents. When I arrived at their house and rang the doorbell, my mom opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to concern at the sight of me so late at night. "Why are you here so late? You look pale. Are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. The moment I saw her caring face, tears streamed down my cheeks. Noticing my distress, my mother wrapped me in a warm blanket and guided me inside. My father, sensing something was off, gently inquired, "What happened?" I broke down and recounted everything, the way my in-laws had treated me and the betrayal I'd uncovered from Frank. My mother was in shock, while my father's anger flared. "It's terrible what they're putting you through," he said, "and to think we helped them financially in the past." His words surprised me. I hadn't known that my husband's family business had been struggling for some time. They had approached my father for financial assistance, believing it was the right thing to do for my sake. "Maybe you should play along for a while, just to see their true colors," my father suggested. At that moment, it seemed like a compelling idea. The following day, I made my way back to my in-laws' house. Standing at the entrance, I shouted, "I'm sorry for being an immature wife. Please let me in." Determined to win their favor, I brought luxury gifts, expensive gourmet ingredients, and fine wine. Finally, they opened the door. My mother-in-law's eyes lit up greedily at the sight of the lavish gifts, but both my father-in-law and Frank greeted me with cold, piercing stares. We only treated you well because we thought you were the daughter of a prestigious hospital. My mother-in-law sneered. Now that we know your family's hospital is drowning in debt, you need to work harder as a wife. I understand, I replied, playing along with their twisted expectations. From that moment on, their treatment of me worsened. My mother-in-law constantly barked orders, treating me like a servant. Get in the kitchen and start cooking, she demanded, shoving me toward the stove, using the gourmet ingredients I had brought. I prepared an elaborate meal and served it to them. My father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband eagerly devoured the dishes, but their complaints never ceased. Is this all you cooked? My mother-in-law asked with a smirk. You might be a smart doctor, but you're a terrible housewife. They devoured every dish I had prepared, but as I finally sat down to eat, my mother-in-law slapped my hand, causing my fork to clatter to the floor. What do you think you're doing? She snapped. You don't eat with us. Housekeepers eat the leftovers in the kitchen. So I'm a housekeeper now? I replied, struggling to contain my anger. How dare you talk back? With all your family's debt, you should be grateful you're still here, she shouted, her voice dripping with disdain. I turned to Frank, hoping he would come to my defense. Frank, do you feel the same way? I never liked your arrogant attitude, Brenda, he responded coldly. I tolerated it because I thought your family was wealthy. Now listen to Mom. Hearing those words shattered something inside me. I realized my in-laws had never truly cared for me. They only wanted money. The man I thought I knew, my husband, had aligned himself with them. It became clear that I needed to reclaim control of my life and not let them break me any further. I'll keep you around as a housekeeper, Frank declared. My heart sank at his true feelings. I had hoped he was merely bowing to his parents' wishes and that deep down, he still cared for me, but that hope was now crushed. He had only married me because he believed my family was wealthy. All along, he had been pretending to care, but now his true colors were glaringly clear. Left to eat the leftover food in the cold kitchen, I faced a daunting pile of dirty dishes waiting for me. Save water and wash them with cold water, they instructed. Scrubbing dishes in freezing water during the bitter winter was unbearable. The chill penetrated my skin, causing my entire body to shiver uncontrollably. When I finally finished, I asked where I was supposed to sleep. My mother-in-law pointed to a small shed outside, devoid of heating and any semblance of a bed. Where's the bed? I asked, already dreading her response. Why do you think you deserve a bed? She snapped. There are old towels and some cardboard in the shed. Make do with that. In that moment, I finally recognized their true nature. Fortunately, I had secretly recorded the derogatory comments they had made to me. I knew then that I couldn't remain in that house any longer. That night, I lay in the freezing shed, filled with anger towards my husband, his mother, and his father. My rage kept me warm against the biting cold of the night air. I vowed never to forgive them. After they had all passed out drunk late that night, I quietly slipped into my car and drove back to my parents' house. The next morning, feeling refreshed after a good night's sleep, I began packing my belongings. Suddenly, the door swung open with a loud bang, and my mother-in-law and husband stormed in, their faces twisted with fury. Do you think you can just leave without making breakfast? My mother-in-law demanded, her voice dripping with disdain. What do you think you're doing? Abandoning your husband? They both shouted, their eyes blazing with anger. Their frightening expressions made it clear they intended to intimidate me. My father-in-law must have been at work, leaving my husband and mother-in-law to confront me alone. But their efforts to scare me were futile. I had made up my mind. I was done with them. I'm finished with both of you, I stated firmly, standing my ground. You dare talk back to us? My husband spat, his voice laced with contempt. You're worse than I thought. If you want a divorce, fine, but if that's what you want, you'll have to pay us compensation. Maybe you can sell the hospital's land. It should fetch a good price. He sneered, convinced he had outmaneuvered me. That's a brilliant idea, I said with a hint of sarcasm as he threw a piece of paper at me. It was a pre-filled divorce application. If you don't do as I say, I'll file this, he threatened, his voice cold. Good, I replied, maintaining my composure. This clears things up for me. Did you think I would beg you not to leave? Just because the hospital is closed and my family is struggling with debt, you think I have no choice but to stay with you? He wore a smug expression, convinced I was trapped, but he couldn't have been more mistaken. Well, here's the truth, my father retired. And yes, he closed the old hospital, but we're not bankrupt. We're building a new hospital near the train station. My brother and I will run it, and I'll be the director. We have more than enough money. As the words left my mouth, I watched my husband's face go pale. My mother-in-law looked equally taken aback. That's a lie, right? My husband stammered, disbelief etched on his features. You deceived me, but I could see the fear flickering in their eyes. They realized I wasn't lying, and I had the upper hand now. I tried to explain myself, but you wouldn't listen. You jumped to conclusions instead. Now you want to question my family's wealth? I said, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. My mother-in-law, clearly panicking, mumbled, so your family is still rich. Then, can we forget everything that happened yesterday and today? We've always had a good relationship, right? It was almost comical to hear her ask for forgiveness after everything she had said to me, all the insults and terrible treatment she had hurled my way, and now she wanted to act as if nothing had transpired. I couldn't believe it. I'm shocked that you could say such horrible things to me and now expect me to forget it all, I replied, my voice steady. Weren't you the one who claimed I was just the housekeeper? No, that was a misunderstanding, she said, desperation creeping into her voice. I'm sorry. Please let it go. It's too late for that, I said firmly. I know how you really feel. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in, then added, by the way, my father is going to demand the $300,000 he loaned to your company back. My husband, who had been standing silently, suddenly broke the tension. What? How did you know about that loan? We don't have that money. Panic washed over his face as he realized the gravity of the situation. Brenda, I'm sorry, he stammered. I should have defended you from Mom. I'll protect you from now on. You mean protect Maria, right? I asked, watching the color drain from his face. He looked genuinely shocked. How do you know about Maria? I found out you were cheating on me while pretending to work late. I have all the proof. I pulled out my phone and showed him the damning pictures and emails documenting his affair. His face turned ashen, and beads of sweat began to form on his forehead. I'm so sorry, he mumbled, looking utterly pathetic. Maria was just a fling. I met her at a bar. I'll end things with her. I promise. Please forgive me. He was sweating profusely, and the sight of him in such a state only fueled my resolve. That's not the worst of it, I said, producing more evidence. I revealed a photo of a life insurance policy he had taken out on me and a pamphlet about car maintenance with the section on tampering with brakes highlighted. You not only wanted my family's money, but you were planning to take my life too, I said, my voice steady. I've already spoken to the police, so you won't be able to harm me. My company is in trouble, he pleaded, desperation in his eyes. I need money. Please help me. Don't be ridiculous, I replied coldly. From now on, we'll communicate through our lawyers. I never want to see you again. In a fit of rage, he lunged toward me, but before he could reach me, my father and brother, who had been quietly waiting in the back room, intervened, pinning him to the ground. My husband squirmed helplessly, and my mother-in-law stood there, speechless and stunned. "This house is in my name," I declared. "I'll be selling it, so I need you both to leave as soon as possible." For far too long, my husband and mother-in-law had found excuses not to move out, but my brother ensured they were gone for good. After that, I filed for divorce. I received compensation from both my husband and the woman he cheated with, despite his constant attempts to win me back. Pleading for a second chance, I threatened to involve the police due to his relentless harassment, which finally made him stop showing up. From that point on, everything was handled through lawyers. I moved on, free from the toxic marriage and the people who had treated me so poorly. I also demanded that my father-in-law's company repay the $300,000 my father had lent them, and thankfully, the money was returned. However, my father-in-law's struggling business eventually went bankrupt, buried under a mountain of debt. Now, my ex-husband, along with my in-laws, lives in a small, run-down apartment, juggling multiple part-time jobs, barely scraping by. As for me, I've embraced a brighter future. I now serve as the director of a new hospital that my brother and I built together, focusing on helping those who are sick or injured. My work brings me immense fulfillment. I also purchased a cozy apartment near the hospital, making life even more convenient. I'm relishing my independence, living life on my own terms, and feeling truly happy and free from the toxicity I once endured.